Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee, home to 24/7 excitement, dining, and an on-site hotel at 1721 West Canal Street. More information at potawatomi.com.
From Apuant Productions and WUWM, this is Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. This is a show about culinary history, why we eat what we eat, the people, the places, the scenes and situations that set the course for the way we dine. For our first season, we contemplated cocktails named after rodents, beef and pork smoked slow and low, and why wine grows so especially well and deliciously halfway between the poles and the equator. We talked about the famous French chef Paul Bocuse. If you're a fan of the animated Disney movie Ratatouille, yes, the chef and his restaurant were inspired by Bocuse. And even why was French food such a big deal in a nation with such a paltry number of immigrants from France? We took a tour of American fast food drive-thrus with a pit stop along the way with an episode on the history of the hamburger and the evolution of supper clubs, both of which are direct descendants of the invention and popularization of the American automobile. Who said the kids always look like their parents? Last but not least, I plunged the depths of the three things if I knew I was writing the menu for my last meal on Earth, I would insist on including on that menu. A warm, crusty loaf of French bread or long fermented sourdough, frozen custard, and a Wisconsin old-fashioned cocktail. For the season's last show, we thought instead of drilling down in the pithy and hopefully interesting way we like to on Classic Eats, we would offer you a quick stop with many of the better moments from our first season. Think of it as a tasting menu of the whole season. There will be some sweet, salty, fatty, and sour, but it's my dearest hope that at the end, you will be satisfied. But more than anything, thanks for taking a seat at the table for Season 1 of Classic Eats. This is Amanda Schuster. She's a cocktail historian and author of a slew of books about cocktails. She's written for Savour, Food and Wine, Forbes, Atlas Obscura. She's an ardent Duran Duran fan, and according to her bio and people we both know, Amanda has been wearing red lipstick even under her mask during the COVID years since she was 14. We caught up about this weirdly delicious ice creamy cocktail drink called the Pink Squirrel. Its story is proof that truth is stranger than fiction. What's in a pink squirrel?
So a pink squirrel is their pink squirrel is an ice cream version that features the liqueur creme de noyau, which in itself is not creamy.
Boy,
by
that's
the
a
way.
mouthful right there. Can you say that slowly so I can understand what you just said?
Creme, spelled the French way,
Creme.
C-R-E with a circumflex. That's actually not a circumflex, an accent, M-E. And when you say creme, what that really just means is that it's a liqueur. It doesn't mean it's a creamy liqueur.
Oh.
So creme de orange, creme
de menthe,
cerise,
yeah. Okay.
So that just refers to something that's sweet but not creamy. But that's an almond liqueur. And when Bowls marketed it in the U.S., they made it pink for some reason.
Bowls is a liqueur maker. Okay.
Yes, it's out of Amsterdam. They are based in Amsterdam.
Been around forever, I would imagine.
It has been around for centuries. It has been around at least until since the early 1800s, possibly the late 1700s.
So Pink Squirrel almond liqueur because squirrels like nuts?
So I guess that was the deal. So did I ever, when we were talking about this, I'm not sure I told you the story of the pink squirrel and how it came to the United States and what happened
if
there?
you did, I'd love to hear it again.
Okay, this is a really great story. So in 1951, Bowls released Creme de Noyau, Noyeaux.
Okay.
In New York in the 1950s, when they would hire models to go
Bowls
around
would hire models.
bars.
Okay.
Yes. Like models,
Sure.
to like put on like a strappy dress and take a squirrel that was dyed pink to a bar.
real squirrel?
Oh, real squirrel, dyed
Okay.
pink.
In the 50s.
In the
Sure,
50s,
it's the
it's the early
asbestos generation.
1950s.
Why not?
Why not? And they would go to like nightclubs, and the squirrel would be with them, and they would send around shots of this drink called the pink squirrel, which was that liqueur with heavy cream and white creme de cacao.
Okay, so you had 2 cremes, and then you had real cream. And women
Yes.
holding live animals that have been dyed against their will. I'm picturing
Yes.
bright pink. Okay.
Bright
How-
pink, and they're feeding people free
and
shots.
feeding people free shots at places like the Copacabana or like nightclubs and things of that ilk in the 50s.
There was one of the reasons we know about this is there was a newspaper there was actually a reporter from the Baton Rouge Times who was in New York and witnessed this happening, and he was in a bar called El Borracho, which no longer
Witnessed
exists.
is
It
the
would have
right
been Midtown.
adjective, by the way.
Uh-huh.
How do they, the thing that I can't have my mind stop thinking about is how do they keep the squirrels from fidgeting and buzzing? I mean, squirrels are, anyone who's observed
They
a
are
squirrel,
squirrels.
they sit still for about a half a second, think about either where their nuts are, where they might be, and then they run off to those locations. So
They found the nuts, let
Yeah.
me tell you. So according to this this newspaper article, yes, the squirrel was very distracted by many things.
these poor we would now call them promotional models, who
Yes.
I'm sure did not move to New York to hold a live animal that was dyed and be scratched. I mean, unless they
Definitely
were pod claw. I don't even want to think about it. I mean, this is. I'm not a PETA person, but there are so many things wrong with this. While we're in the cocktail lounge nightclub bar neighborhood, it only seemed appropriate to revisit a bit of my conversation with Ron Faiola. Ron is a filmmaker, but he is best known as the author of 3 books on the dining phenomenon called The Supper Club. It started when he made a film about church festivals, initially titled Drinking for Jesus, but surprisingly, he found distribution difficult. Retitled, that film led to a film about fish fries, which led to a film about supper clubs, which led to a book, which led to 2 more. As with a great dinner with friends or family, at the aforementioned supper clubs, things can get carried away. I asked Ron, what exactly is a supper club? His answer is as follows.
Supper clubs are family run. The family often lives on the premises. When they go on vacation to go duck hunting or something, they put a sign on the door that says, we'll be back next week. They're open unusual hours or limited hours in the winter or closed altogether, and longer hours, obviously, in the summer. The food is made from scratch, and they serve a great brandy old fashioned usually. So
what kind of meals do they serve? Is it breakfast? Is it lunch? Is it dinner?
Well, for the first book and the movie and for the second book, I was concentrating on places that was supper only.
Mm-hmm.
There are places that do lunch and brunch on weekends. So nothing against those places. In fact, in the new book, I included I think at least one place that serves lunch. So it's American cuisine. It's steaks, chops, seafood. There's no fancy French sauces. There's no hard to pronounce names of food or anything. As exotic as it gets is probably turkey gizzards or chicken gizzards or liver pate. But yeah, it's like their character.
Yeah.
There's 3 basic decor items that I call the Holy Trinity that you'll find in all supper clubs in Wisconsin is taxidermy, dark wood paneling, and twinkly lights. So any one of those 3.
Now, the supper club and the drive-through window owe a huge debt to the American automobile, and maybe even equally to the American freeways and highways. Adam Chandler, my next guest, is an extraordinary writer. He's written about things as varied as the Hawaiian gardens of a poet laureate, Chinese food for Christmas, and the surreal political moments of the 2016 presidential campaign. He's written for every publication you've heard of, and maybe a few you haven't, from the New York Times to Texas Monthly. I caught up with him while he was traveling to talk about his book, Drive-Through Dreams. What is your favorite thing to write about in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years, I think
Not that's even been successful, but to write about it. I mean, maybe it's haikus or something. I don't know.
that's a good question. It's a lot of fun to write about major dining trends and how they're changing and what we're consuming and why. And I think that, even if I don't necessarily understand it or agree with it, I feel like I learn a lot. Like last month, Starbucks released this crazy coffee drink with protein infused foam. And that strikes me as sort of, what is this moment that we're in where, this brand that marketed themselves as being this company that has this craft coffee that's better than your regular sort of Maxwell House or Dunkin's or whatever it is now leaning into this insane protein bro kind of mentality that has come up as an American trend. So I'm fascinated by this. I think it's all interesting, and I want to know more about it. So that's fun to write about. I feel like I learn about the world around me. I'm in my own bubble. I think we're all in our own bubbles in a certain way. And so finding what big companies are doing to cater to audiences that I have no access to or, want to find out more about is great.
Mm-hmm.
What about
you? Protein is the no fat or the low fat of the 90s. And
yes.
That's just where we're at in culture right now. And I think that in 5 years, everybody over the age of 5 will be on creatine, but that's another story.
Well, what's interesting about the growth of fast food is that once you had a lot of hamburger chains, there were people who were seeking to find ways to make other cuisines translate to fast food. And so we would get different kinds of bizarro fast food items. I mean, fried chicken isn't naturally something you would imagine being portable and friendly for that purpose, but it is. You put it in a bucket or you wrap it up in paper and you can eat it one-handed. It's not impossible to do that. You could see the growth of pizza as something that is portable and is thought of in that way. It's not really the drive-through, but it is delivered via car, so it has this kind of significance in that way of being something that is inherently portable, right? You did see the growth of different things. Early in say Jack in the Box's days, they created this version of a taco that was relatively easy to transport. They fried it. They fried it after they prepared it, so it kind of congealed together in a delicious and disgusting fashion. And there's a whole cult following around Jack in the Box tacos. But yeah, you saw initially more potato chips than French fries. You saw hamburgers. There were some hot dogs out there. We associate it with the burger, and I think that was kind of American symbolism in a lot of ways of ground beef and the cattle trails. We have this real affinity and association with red meat in American life that speaks to kind of our conquering of the frontiers, our cattle rustling past of humble cowboy yeomen blazing the trails. That's always been part of it. And I think that when we think about eating red meat and burgers specifically, it all gets into that same headspace around the psychology of what we're eating.
Bread, the staff of life, the pan quotidian, the greatest thing since sliced, well, yeah. You get the idea. When you produce a show like this, sometimes you have to cast a net wider than you might think to get just the right guest. I'm going to be honest, my first conversation, just over the phone, with bread historian William Rubel did not go well. But still, there was something there, so I stuck with him as a guest for this episode. Among the dozens of things I did not expect him to say was his take on the current state of Japanese bread baking, and it might just be the best.
The first bakery that I ate there was at the hotel that I used to stay at in Tokyo. They had a bakery. I think it's called More. Anyway, I just couldn't believe the variety and the quality. Turned out bakery's in the basement, so I went down, and the man had taught himself mostly on YouTube, which I had not expected, of course, because you also think of Japan and the apprentice tradition, that you throw that same pot for 30 years.
Yeah, that surprises me as well.
What you see in the food. I mean, these are people that are practicing, this one dish for their entire life. But with the bread, it's new, so they're using the other side of Japanese culture, which is experiment. So it's a fusion. It can be a fusion bread. I remember the sourdough baguette was just incredible. He had put it in the freezer for 24 hours. So I mean, it had one leavening cycle. One leavening cycle was like in the freezer. It was this amazing combination of digital perfection and handwork. So there's women, they're usually doing the detailed handwork, and they've got scissors. They're cutting, with scissors into bread, stuffing things into them to bake. It is amazing. What I saw was amazing. So yeah, they're innovative.
We already established that if I were planning my last meal, good bread, probably a crusty warm baguette, would be part of it. French cuisine has given us so much. Between their food and giving us a big old hand in our American Revolution, the least we could do was help them out in World War II, and we did. But why French food? Why does it hold so much sway over our American cookbooks, kitchens, and casseroles? Author David Camp and I dig in, starting with some nonsense about supposed conspiracies, a 19-year-old Jacques Pepin, and Charles de Gaulle, the French president from 1959 to 1969. So was this a conscious decision? Did de Gaulle and his counselors or ministers get together and say, we are now going to take over America with our food? I mean, how did this actually in practical terms happen?
Well, first of all, that sounded more like John Cleese impersonating a French person in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I actually do a very good John Cleese by way of a Frenchman, so thank you.
Yeah, but way more entertaining than an authentic French accent. So I'm nothing but applauding here. What happened was nothing so mandated or designed as de Gaulle saying we want a French takeover of American cuisine. However, there was some diplomacy afoot, because it really started in 1939 and 1940 when the United States hosted the World's Fair in Flushing Meadows, Queens, New York City. And so it was a 2-year-long World's Fair. And the French decided to devote a lot of their pavilion space to what they called Restaurant Français, which is simply a French restaurant showcasing, the sophisticated cuisine that they had to offer. And the guy tapped to oversee that was the manager of a restaurant in Paris named Henri Soulet, a stout little man who looked like a French Alfred Hitchcock. Very snobby, unbearable guy in some ways, but he was a visionary.
Straight out of Central Casting for
exactly,
the French.
He was.
And
he was a snob, and he looked down on people, even though he looked like a character actor, all that stuff.
Apparently looking up at people, looking down at people, as you described him.
A wee man, but a wee man in height, if not in girth. Soulet tapped a young guy named Pierre Frenet to be the kind of the head kitchen guy there. And this thing was a sensation. Like, people were turned on by electrified palate-wise by the amazingness of French cuisine in America. Yes, we have already established that Henri Soulet, though he was a restaurant visionary, was a bit of a difficult man. And a lot of people had fallings out with him. Not a lot of people left his restaurant on good terms. And so Pierre Frenet, who would also, by the way, later pair up with Craig Claiborne to publish recipes in the New York Times food section. But Pierre Frenet was Soulet's head chef at Le Pavillon. Pierre, and one of his deputies that he brings over is a very young Jacques Pepin, who had actually worked as the personal chef for Charles de Gaulle. And at age 19 or something like that.
So back to my story about de Gaulle and his ministers getting together. So there is a conspiracy. And finally, a bit from my amazing conversation with Adrian Miller. Among being a former senior staffer for the Clinton Foundation, a James Beard Award winner for his writing, the author of 5 books on culinary history, he was, and will be the authority on the history and current state of American barbecue. There are so many parts of my conversation with Adrian that couldn't make the barbecue episode because of time. This segment, where we talk about Asian barbecue, is one of my favorite, which sadly had to be cut in the original episode. It's the way that it ends that I think is really the perfect note on which to land to wrap up our first season of Classic Eats.
I mean, I've been able to travel around the world, and Texas barbecue is showing up everywhere. So that's interesting. I think the other things that are interesting are just kind of the fusion as people are looking to other cultures. So you're seeing a lot of Asian American fusion, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand. I think that's all really interesting.
Talk about where Asian barbecue is and that influence coming in, because it's a long history. And it seems only in the last sort of 10, maybe even less, 7 years, has it started to trend and really catch on with its hooks in American dining culture. And we could go deep into a lot of reasons why that is. But, you see this from 30,000 feet. So can you share some of your insights about that?
Yeah, I just think there's a common culinary vocabulary. The emphasis on pork in a lot of Asian cultures and beef as well, and chicken. I think it's been the popularity of Asian cuisine in other spaces that's opened the door to barbecue. I think the increased interest in like pho, the traditional Vietnamese soup, Korean fried chicken in various different ways, sushi, all these other things. I think what's been really great is to see the American palate expand and be more willing to explore and accept these other flavor profiles from around the world. So I think that set things up. I think that's one part of this. These cultures have a tradition of grilling and smoking. So that sets them up for integration with barbecue and fusing with barbecue. And I think the other thing is, the nature of food is that we get to love something, we get introduced to something, we get to love it, and then we're like, okay, what's next? And so I think there's always kind of a pressure on cooks and chefs to be cutting edge, right? And look for the new thing. So I think a lot of what's going on right now is just trying to create the new thing. And we're getting delicious results.
That's our show, and the last episode for the first season of Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. I hope we took you to some new places. I hope we made you hungry, entertained, and intrigued. More than anything, I hope we took you just a little bit behind the curtain regarding the foods we eat and drink, and showed you how we are all guests and hosts, diners and directors of menus at the table we call Classic Eats. We'll see you in 6 weeks for season 2. And in the meantime, relish each sip or bite. They are all at once calories and taste, and entirely sacred. And at times, they can take us all the way back home. Thanks for taking a seat at our table for Season 1 of Classic Eats.
Classic Eats is created and hosted by Kyle Johnson Cherek and co-produced by Apuan Productions and WUWM.
Executive producers Kyle Johnson Cherek and Rob Schoonover. Audio editing and engineering by Brian Arkta and John Rymaszewski.